Hey everybody, I hope you can hear me. This is an experiment, which I hope is going to be really successful because the plan is to do these once a month. We're having some technical problems and I'm using my phone instead of my laptop because we couldn't manage to get the camera to work. The limitation is that I probably won't be able to see your questions live, which I was really looking forward to. But I promise, maybe somebody will help us by next month. We will have it fixed and we'll be able to do it on the laptop and you'll be able to send the questions live to me. But I have a bunch of questions that folks sent in already. So we've more than enough to fill an hour and probably then some. So welcome to Office Hours. The witch is in, which I've already heard from some of you, is a phrase that they like to use. And I've been using it for a very long time. I have a little orange plaque that says the witch is in. And I would put it on my office door when I was willing to be interrupted from writing. So welcome all you awakening witches. I'm hoping you can see me, that this is working. Comments will appear here. Okay, so maybe I'll actually be able to see them. That'd be super. I'm kind of looking at myself, so I hope that's what you're seeing. If somebody's on, let me know if you can see me. So whether you can see me or not, let's take a moment and just be together in circle. There are a lot of you out there, I know, hopefully joining me now. Yep, there we go. Looking good. Thank you, Robin. All right, then I'm going to relax about that. So there are a bunch of you out there, witches in Wonderland. I am absolutely thrilled that so many of you are awakening. We've got over 200 now on the Awaken the Witch Within. I know some of you may be coming from the public page, and the community is growing. So that's what I'd like to begin with, is just that moment. You can leave your eyes open, you can close them. I just want to take a moment where we take a few deep breaths and see ourselves in circle with the witches who are awakening, who are hearing the call of the mother and who are responding, who are returning to her. That is an amazing community of men and women. It's growing every day. It's growing within this circle, and there are circles around that circle and circles around that circle. There are concentric rings that are now encircling the globe. And I know there are folks here that are participating from the Netherlands, from Brazil, from Italy, from Australia. So we really are a global community. I've always been a global published author. So I'm very excited to be back and to be back in circle with you. So I can actually sort of see this. It's really marvelous. I don't know if I can. Look at that. Bonnie Marie, Ryan Castle, Chris Fielding. Thank you. Thank you guys for being here. What a pleasure. I'm really honored. So let me do some of the questions. They're really terrific. One of the first ones that came in from a number of folks is asking what my definition of a witch is. So I love that question because I love giving that answer. To me, a witch is a wise one. The word witch, W-I-T-C-H, is the 16th century, and now the modern spelling of the original word wicca, W-I-C-C-E. If you've heard me speak before, you've probably heard me say this, but wicca, W-I-C-C-E, is a 5,500-year-old word. Amazing. Dates back to the Proto-Indo-European, which was one of the largest language systems in the world at the time. And it meant a wise one. It meant a seer of the sacred. It meant a shaman. And that is what a witch is. It is a seer of the sacred, whether a man or a woman. In fact, Wicca, W-I-C-C-A, was the male term, and Wicca, W-I-C-C-E, witch, W-I-T-C-H, the phonetic spelling, is female. Wicca ended up being what the movement is called. I like to use the term witcha. And in public, and when I'm giving talks at the Parliament of the World's Religions and other places, I use the word witcha because that is the original term. And I think it helps take a little bit of the sting, which remains, despite 40 years of hard work, out of that word witch. And it allows people to sort of embrace it in a way that doesn't provoke that knee-jerk reaction. And it is also an honoring of our ancestors, our ancestral indigenous wisdom tradition, what it was actually called, and what is remembered lives. So a witch to me is a wise one, a seer of the sacred, a shaman, or a practitioner of shamanism. And a witch is somebody who is paying attention. That's the definition that I came up with 20 years ago when I wrote my second book, Witchcrafting. What are they paying attention to? They are paying attention to the divine that is embodied by the world in which we live and by each of us. It is a seer of the sacred. So that is who a witch is. What is my definition of magic? Another wonderful term that I really love to talk about. And over the years, over 40 odd years, that definition has evolved as I have evolved. As I've matured, I think my definition has matured. When I first began, I learned the definition that most people still continue to use, which is the art of changing consciousness at will, and having changed consciousness, then changing reality around you. To me, that is still a very valid definition. It came from the Golden Dawn traditions, the ceremonial magical traditions that had a tremendous influence on the rebirth of contemporary witchcraft. And certainly the opening of the doors of perception, the ways in which we alter our consciousness from beta consciousness, which is what we're in most of the time when we're driving our car or buying our groceries, survival consciousness, to an altered state of consciousness which is more perceptive, more able to see the sacred that resides, that is embodied in the world in which we live. That is, in fact, the first step of discovering what magic is, of discovering the magic that's within you, and discovering the magic of the world in which you live. When I wrote my first book, Book of Shadows, and I wrote it as a memoir, and I recounted my early experiences in discovering this circle of witches in New York, which was very hidden at the time. I wanted to evoke the feeling of being in circle, of practicing magic, of learning how to cast a circle, honor the four directions, invoke the divine. Hi, it's Sydney. We just had a message pop up. I have to say hello, good morning from Sydney, Australia. Good morning. As I began to recount those events, I realized that the greatest magic that I was trying to communicate to the people who would read the book, and I hope themselves then discover the magic within themselves and in the world around them, that magic was not the magic that I did to simply alter consciousness and then my consciousness and then try to effectuate change within myself and in the world around me. The real magic that I wanted to share with people was the magic of the divine that was engaged in this extraordinary dance with me. A divine that was alive, that was aware of me, that cared about me, that in fact loved me, and that flowed into me, into my heart when it was open, and into my life when I opened my life to it, and changed me, because the first thing that magic changes is you. And the techniques were the means by which I opened myself to this divine flow of energy into me, and then from me and through me into the world. And that is now my understanding of magic. For many years, and really from the very beginning, I realized that was what magic was. That was how I sought to practice magic. That was the purpose of magic, the reason for magic, the magic of magic. It is what happens when we open our hearts to the divine that is embodied by the world in which we live, that certainly fills realms of spirit, but most of all fills us transforms us, changes us, loves us, nourishes us, sustains us, engages us, challenges us, makes magic within us, awakens the magic within us, and then having done that, flows from us into the world, in the ways that we live, the people that we love, the ways in which we interact with the world around us, the magic that we make, the values that we have, and how we seek to live in a sacred manner because we live in a sacred world. That is the magic that I practice, and that's my definition of magic. That's a very long answer. I just got a question here. So I'm going to try to take some of these questions because they disappear off my little tiny phone screen. I'm going to interrupt myself to answer some of them. So Lisa Dawnben asked, which of your books should a beginner buy first? I would say Wicca Made Easy, which has just been published recently by Hay House, and which is a wonderful guide. It's actually a terrific guide for people who've been practicing for a while because it reorients the practice in a way that's very much about embodied divinity. And it simplifies and clarifies a lot of the traditional practices in accord with this idea of magic as the divine flowing into us and from us into the world. So I'd start with that. You could also, I certainly love, I love my first book, Book of Shadows, which is a terrific thing to read along with Wicca Made Easy. Wicca Made Easy is an introduction to theology and philosophy and practices. So it's not just ideas, but a lived experience by using those practices. But Book of Shadows is a memoir written like a novel, and it reads very quickly, and I think it engages your feelings and your heart, and that's a wonderful way to learn. I think storytelling is one of the most powerful ways to engage us and to engage our hearts and to learn through the heart. So I think maybe both of them. And somebody just said, thank you for the beautiful work that you do. Thank you. I hope I'm going to be able to see these later. And if I'm not answering them right away, it's because they're flying off the screen. Wicca Made Easy. Very well. Okay. Burn Sage. I'm sorry, I lost this one. I burn sage and I've done a tarot reading about it. How do I get rid? You're going to have to send that question again because it was too long and it rolled off the screen. So I'm going to run back quickly to my definition of magic. Magic is certainly a spiritual technology. I think that's what witchcraft is. I think that's what shamanism is. It's a spiritual technology. It's a way of hacking the brain and opening the heart to experience the real magic, the great magic, the magic that we're meant to work with, which is the magic of the divine, from which everything is created, and which flows into life as it's created into all of us and through us into the world. And witchcraft is the art of learning to work with that magic. Book of Shadows, my first Wiccan read. I've shared it with many others. Thanks, Lisa. Hi, Catherine. I hope that answers your question. And one of the great things about this, I'll take 2 seconds more. I see so many people now are trying to practice witchcraft, and I see this common definition everywhere, which really is more of a definition of a cult practice than being a witch. And that is the idea of magic or witchcraft as setting your intention, and then basically sort of the lovely technology, the artistry of working with the divine, working with nature, casting a circle, working with the elements in order to effectuate your intention, your heart's desire, to manifest your heart's desire. And that is the technology. But the greater purpose is our relationship to the divine, our embodiment of the divine, and rediscovering our role within the web of life and the very special purpose that we as human beings have, but have forgotten. There's a lot more to magic than simply setting your intention and seeking to manipulate forces to manifest your will. That's where you start, but that is not where you finish. Okay. I really enjoyed Book of Shadows. Yes, it was translated into Spanish. I believe it was called, I have it on my bookshelf, but you'll find it. It was translated into Spanish. I don't have plans for translating other titles into Spanish right now, but I'm being invited to teach in Spain, and so there is some discussion underway about translating my other 3 books into Spanish. So please be sure that you go to my website, phylliscurott.com, and make sure that you join the e-list, sign up for my e-list so that I can keep you posted and we can correspond and I'll let you know. Okay, Lisa Dawn, you're back. Can we have? Can't see what it says. Somebody else typed in thankful. Listen, everybody, thank you for being patient with me and my technological limitations. I really do appreciate it. Okay. How do you handle the pressures of coming out as a witch to family, friends, and community? I want to talk about this. It's very important. A number of people have asked this question. So let's talk about it for a few minutes, all right? First of all, you don't need to come out unless you want to, unless you feel ready to, unless you feel comfortable and supported. I hope you'll feel supported by me and by this community, by the growing community of witches. But you don't have to do it, right? It depends on where you live. It depends on the circumstances of your life. It depends on whether you're a single mother living in the South. It depends on who your employers are, even though, as a lawyer, I can assure you that an employer is not allowed to fire you because of your religion. That's religious discrimination and it's against the law. But you don't want to find yourself in that situation. So the decision is entirely yours. My own decision was made almost immediately. I'm a rebel. I'm tough. I've always been a fighter. And in 1983, when I became a Wiccan high priestess, I just felt I could not practice the spirituality in fear. When I saw what it actually was, where it came from, and what it offered the world, I just felt like I couldn't hide. And so I was public almost immediately. And there's no question but that I paid a price for it. Not so much immediately, but when my books came out after 20 years, and they were very public, and I did a tremendous amount of publicity, tremendous amount of press all over the world. I was highly visible. Every major daily newspaper across the world, major television shows, CNN, Bill O'Reilly, a long list. And I lost a number of my clients. So the fact is that witchcraft is now the fastest growing spirituality in the United States, which I was saying in the 1990s. And that gives you safety in numbers. We're everywhere. And if you're public, people can find you. And that, of course, can be scary, right? Because depending on where you live, there are people you don't want to find you. But your community can also find you. And the support and the nourishment of your community is a marvelous thing, which takes me to how do we connect with other witches? We'll get to that one next. So coming out. So the first thing is to decide what your personal circumstances are. And if they allow you to be public, I would encourage you to do so. You must do so aware that you'll run into people who don't understand and people who may be hostile. And then the question comes, how do you explain, if you're in a situation, how do you explain what a witch is? I usually begin not by using the word witch, but by using the word witcha, and by explaining that I am practicing the contemporary, the modern revival of my ancestral indigenous wisdom tradition. That it's very much like other indigenous wisdom traditions. It's a lot like Native American spirituality. We see the world as sacred. We see the divine as indwelling, as a part of each of us, and as embodied by the natural world in which we live. And so we seek to live in a sacred manner because we live in a sacred world. And our practices are about bringing us into harmony with the divine that is embodied by nature. By living in harmony with nature, we come to live in harmony with the divine. And at this particular point in the environmental crises that are confronting the world, in which we have 10 years to turn around the calamities that are now threatening the future of life on Earth, in fact, it's a spirituality that is enormously valuable, perhaps even essential to the survival of life on Earth. And so it's a spirituality that I practice with pride and with gratitude. And I don't proselytize, but I'm happy to share and to explain further if you'd like to. That is how I come out when I'm with people who don't know anything about witchcraft. When they ask what it is, I will say it is one of the common terms that we use now is the craft of the wise. I'm a witcher. It's called witchcraft. The word witch, W-I-T-C-H, is the modern spelling of the word witcher. It's a 5,000-year-old word, and it meant a wise one, a seer of the sacred, a shamanism. That's what it was. It was the shamanism, the ancestral indigenous wisdom tradition of our ancestors. And it's having a tremendous contemporary revival because it experiences the divine is not just male, but also female. It has a role for women as spiritual leaders, and it honors our innate divinity. It honors the divine embodied by us and by the world in which we live. And we see the natural world as an expression of the divine. And so we seek to live in harmony with it. And so to live in a way that is respectful, grateful, in which we learn to give back, to take no more than we need and give back in kind, to waste nothing, to treat the world that we live, other life, each other, ourselves, with reverence and with respect. And it's a wonderful way to live. That is a very powerful way to come out, to articulate the heart of what this spirituality is about. You notice I don't use language like casting spells. I don't use the word witch usually until I've gotten till the end of the explanation. I did this for many, many years because I was working in the interfaith community for more than 20 years and ultimately became the vice chair of the Parliament of the World's Religions. I was engaged with members of the world's faith traditions from all over the world for many, many years. And so learned to find ways of speaking, and also because I did so much media for so long, to try to find ways of speaking that corrected for the distortion in people's lenses that was the result of 500 years of terrible stereotypes and distortion. So you speak in a vocabulary using terms that people can relate to and understand. So what's a spell? Someone might ask you, do you cast spells? And the answer is yes. A spell is very much like a prayer. Only instead of going to a divinity that is outside of yourself and asking it to intercede on your behalf, although we do appeal to the divine, which is greater than simply our small selves, we also know that the divine dwells within us. And so we go to the well of our own inner divinity and we bring it up and give it shape and form in the world around us. And that is what a spell is. It's a way of working with the divine that dwells within us and in the world all around us to give shape and form to our gifts and our blessings and the things that we wish to bring into our life to make our lives better or to help other people if they ask for help. You'll find a lot of this actually on my website. We have an FAQ, and on my Temple of Ara website, we also have an FAQ. And it might be helpful to you in finding answers to the common questions that people will ask you if and when you decide to go public. And remember, you get to set the terms, and you get to use the terms that you want in explaining yourself and your spirituality and your spiritual practices to other people. Keep it simple, keep a smile on your face, and don't engage with people who are not open-hearted to what you have to say. I generally don't get engaged in conversations with evangelical preachers or very conservative rabbis, Orthodox rabbis, or mullahs of Sunni persuasions, because they're not listening. It's a closed system. They have a patriarchal model, and they can't hear me, even though I try to use a vocabulary that will communicate to them. So you don't have to feel compelled to explain yourself to those who don't understand. And one reason I wrote my first book, Book of Shadows, was to open the world of witchcraft, what we actually did, what we believed, how we practiced, the relationship to the goddess, to Mother Earth, to explain that to the world so that people would see how absolutely gorgeous the spirituality actually is. So what else about going public? Stay within your comfort zone. You are not compelled to be public if you don't want to be. Be prepared to answer questions about it if you decide to be public. Keep the answers simple and clear. I would say don't begin with the word witch. Begin with the fact that you're practicing a contemporary revival of your ancestral indigenous wisdom tradition, which is a lot like Native American spiritual traditions as well. And you've framed it in such a way that people are listening, they step forward. By the time you get to the word witch, you've said enough so that even though they may have that little bit of reaction, then you can explain the term witch, and they'll keep listening, and they will actually find themselves very often fascinated. What else? Yeah, I would say the other thing is to practice in friendly company. When you decide to come out, pick somebody that that you think will be sympathetic, who will be interested in listening to you. You could even do it with a friend who already knows that you're a witch, and practice with them. That's a good thing. If you guys are interested, oh, you're welcome. If you're interested, I will tell you a funny story about the first time, really, the first time I decided I would be public. This is me. This is my crazy life. When I tell the world I want something, it goes, yeah? Okay, here. So it was like 1984. I mean, I actually already had been public because I had been doing public rituals, and I'd been working with the New York City Parks Department and getting permits for people, and doing some legal work in the public eye as a witch on behalf of other witches. But in 1984, was 84? 84, 85, I decided it was time to be public with people who were strangers who didn't know. And I made up my mind that the next time I was in a situation where it was appropriate to talk about the fact that I was a witch, and what situation would that be? Right? But should it happen to come up, I would explain that I was a witch. Mind you, 84, 85, really crazy, right? Because it was really hidden at the time. So I was on the bus, the Hampton Jitney, coming back from having spent a summer weekend with my mother at her house, her summer house on the water. And I was sitting on the bus, and I got into a conversation with a gentleman who was seated next to me, about my age, a little bit older. And we got into a conversation about New York City politics and the current mayor, David Dinkins. Pretty progressive guy, but I really was not a fan. And as the conversation progressed, I got into explaining why I wasn't a fan. And it had to do with a lawsuit in which I was the attorney on behalf of a group of witches in New York City who had been trying to register as clergy in order to perform legally binding weddings in New York City. And I was the attorney. I had a civil liberties background. They had come to me to represent them. I was acting as a pro bono attorney representing them to fight City Hall to win witches the right to perform legally binding weddings. And I was dealing with David Dinkins, and he was the one putting the roadblock in our path. And so I was in this battle with him. So I was talking about how he's very progressive and the Rainbow Coalition, which he was very famous for at the time. But when you came right down to it, he wasn't very good about witches. And the guy was like, witches? What do you mean witches? Pointy hats? And I thought to myself, okay. And so I started to explain what witchcraft was. And in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, you had promised, you told yourself that the next time that somebody asked you, or it came up, or, you had the opportunity, you were going to be honest and you were going to say, I'm a witch. This is your opportunity. But I kept explaining what witchcraft was, and he turned to me and he said, you seem to know an awful lot about this. And I was like, okay, that's it. And I said, yes, I do, because I'm a witch. And the conversation got a lot deeper after that. And I was out. That was it. The bus pulls into the bus station in New York, and we're getting up to go. We're collecting our belongings. The guy reaches into his wallet, pulls out a card, hands it to me, and says, I'm the feature editor of Newsday, which is a very big newspaper here in New York on Long Island. I'm the feature editor. I'd like to do a story on you, and I'd like to do a story on witchcraft. And I agreed to do it. So not only did I come out, I came out. And it was good for me. It was really good for me to do it. It was deeply empowering. So, magic works in mysterious ways. If you say you're going to do something, that's one of the things. If a witch makes a promise, she has to keep her word. And every time the universe has asked me to do something or I've given my word, sometimes it's taken me longer than others, but I always keep my word and good things always come from it. My life changed. And without that moment of truth, I would never have had the opportunity to write my books. I wouldn't be doing this with you now. I wouldn't have lived the life that I led. And even though there were some sacrifices involved, more wonderful, many, many, many more wonderful things happened than any of the few negatives that I had to deal with. And in dealing with those negatives, I found that I had a strength and a determination and a purpose that was far greater than anything that opposed me. Yeah, somebody just said, awesome. Yes, it was. So, okay, how do you connect with other witches? Well, one way is by being public. When you're public, other witches tend to find you. One of the things that we're going to try to do, this has been a question that keeps coming up. Of course, we set up the Awaken the Witch Within Facebook group. So go and join that. If you haven't already done so, if you're taking the Awaken the Witch Within course with Hay House, you will be able to join. I suppose I shouldn't do this, but I'm going to, which is to give you the password, even if you're not taking the course, although you should, you absolutely should, in order to have the password, but I'm going to do it now. It's witch, W-I-T-C-H, so you can join the group. There you will find other witches. And what we're going to do over the next couple of weeks is help people to indicate where they're from so they can find each other and begin to work together in study groups. At the back of Witchcrafting, my second book, I have a whole long section on how to create a study group, how to work with, now you could work with Wicca Made Easy, certainly, but you can also work with Witchcrafting, which is a longer text. Wicca Made Easy is basically a textbook that will work with the Awaken the Witch Within course. And the deeper, longer, more extensive version of that would be Witchcrafting. And with those two books, it's not hard to do. You can set up a study group. You can put a notice on your own Facebook page or on Awaken the Witch Within, or you can go to my public page and put up a little note there. Or you can write to me and we will try to help organize study groups based upon where people are located. So we're going to get you together, and then you will have the materials that will help you to actually run a study group. It's a collective process. It's not all on you. It's not on the one person who sort of initiates it. It's a shared responsibility, and I explain how to do that. The whole thing is laid out, and we have additional materials that we can provide you with. And it's a very simple thing. You can meet as often as you like or as infrequently as you like. I have a recommendation as to frequency to keep momentum going, sharing responsibility, a course of practices, so you're working with other people, and it's an opportunity to see what it's like to experience energy in a circle, working with other people. It's an extraordinary process. I have always felt that the best way to practice is both alone, because there are things that you can do alone that you cannot do in a group, and to work in a group because there are energies and experiences that you'll have, validation, empowerment, an increased sense of energy, the ability to accomplish things that you can't do when you're alone. So both are really essential to your development as a witch. Some people prefer, ultimately, to work alone, and some people prefer to work in groups. I think it's useful to do both, and so we will help you. Other ways of working, of finding other witches to work with, is to go to local bookstores, local occult bookstores, new age bookstores, esoteric bookstores, and you put up a little notice. You look for other people's notices and you put up a little notice. You can say, I'm working with Awaken the Witch Within. I'm working with Wicca Made Easy by Phyllis Curott. I'm interested in working with those of you who may be familiar with her work, the Temple of Ara, the tradition of Ara, Awaken the Witch Within, Wicca Made Easy, Witchcrafting, Book of Shadows, but any of those, if you put those up there, they're sufficiently well known. I mean, Book of Shadows sold well over 250,000 copies. There are a lot of people in the United States who've read Book of Shadows and will recognize it if you put it up on a public site. And like I said, you can go to Awaken the Witch Within, or you can go to my site or write to us. So you can put a little notice on your own Facebook page if you're out, sufficiently out. You can put a little notice in a bookstore, occult, New Age, Wiccan, and you say, I'm interested in starting, not a coven. You don't have to jump into a coven. You start with a study group that meets. You'll decide with the other people who show up. I have a whole discussion on how you figure out whether you're well suited to each other, whether you get along, whether you have chemistry. I think if you're working with Wicca Made Easy or Awaken the Witch Within, you're going to have a similar framework, and you'll probably find that you actually kind of like each other. There are always issues about personalities, but we've got a lot of stuff about how you work with that too. And you start, I think, with a study group. You can certainly look. There are lots of other traditions around. I talk about it in Awaken the Witch Within. I talk about it in Wicca Made Easy. There are lots of other traditions that are out and that are available and that are online, and you'll find them. There's also one of the oldest sites that's been around for many years that by Fritz and Wren, who've done the community just a huge service. They've run this thing for so many years and done such a brilliant job. And it's not as well known as it used to be, but it's still so important, called Witch Vox, V-O-X, Witch Vox. And it was the place to go to find other folks who are practicing in various traditions or looking for other folks to work with in your area. It's organized by state, city by city. You can go there, sign in, put up a little notice that you are in Tallahassee, and that you're working with Wicca Made Easy or whatever, and that you're interested in finding other folks who might be interested in working with you. So that is a great way to connect with other witches. Another way to do it that we're going to be doing, I'm sure, with office hours, or interspersed with office hours over the next couple of months, we're going to be developing all of this, is to have online circles. We started to do this with Temple of Ara, and we have a full moon circle that runs with Temple of Ara that one of the priestesses in my tradition, Linda Maglionico, sorry, I have a little bit of head cold, so Linda Maglionico runs on a regular basis, and I will also, periodically I do Sabbath circles, and we're going to be doing circles online, so that'll be another opportunity for you to connect with other witches and to work together. It's not quite the same as being in the same room, but we're all over the world, and I was skeptical, but having done quite a number of circles now online, it's extraordinary. We actually cast the circle online, we run the energy online, we chant together, we direct the energies, and we have accomplished absolutely amazing things. So that's another way to connect with other witches. How can witches help the world? Oh my goodness. Well, this is the subject of the talk, of one of the forms of the talk that I am now giving, which is why the world needs her witches. There's a wound. And the short version is that there's a wound at the heart of humanity. It started thousands of years ago when we sent the divine off into the heavens and started to treat the earth as if it was inanimate matter that we could do with as we pleased. And that wound has opened and deepened, and it is a wound that has to be healed. And witches have always been healers. We were the midwives and the herbalists and the healers of bodies and souls. And that is the wound that we have a very important role in healing. We heal it through our magic. We heal it by being a channel for the magic to flow through us. And the nature of that magic ultimately is an understanding that spirit and world are one. That we and spirit are one, that we and world are one, and that all is sacred in that oneness, and that we have to learn to live in a sacred way. One of the things that I've been talking about with the pagan and the Wiccan community, I'm going to talk about it this weekend at Celebrate Samhain in Nashua, New Hampshire. I'm really excited, and I'm giving that talk, Why the World Needs Her Witches, is that for a long time we had the threefold law, which I talk about briefly in Wicca Made Easy and at greater length in Witchcrafting. And 20 years ago when I said this, it was revolutionary. And it is simply that the threefold law is not the reason that witches don't do baneful magic or hex or any of that stuff. We don't use magic or spells to have power over other people. It was made up by Gerald Gardner when Doreen Valiente pressed him and said, listen, it's a religion. You need to have some kind of ethics. People need a morality. That's one reason they seek out religions. What is ours? And he'd spent a lot of time in India as a civil servant. And so he was thinking about karma. And he said, well, what you send out returns to you 3 times over. It's not so. I mean, that's not the natural order of things, right? And we are nothing if not attentive to the wisdom and the laws of nature, because nature embodies the divine. So nature is our ultimate spiritual teacher. Well, okay. So on top of that, the threefold law really is a kind of punishment, right? What is it saying? It's saying I won't do anything bad, because if I do something worse, it's going to happen to me. Well, that's what you need, right? It's very Abrahamic. It's very patriarchal. It's what you need if the divine isn't present in the world. If God, the divine, has left and in his stead leaves you a rule book and a threat of punishment if you don't behave, if you don't follow the 10 Commandments, if you don't follow my laws, the Quran, the Bible, you will be punished, right? You will be sent to hell, you will be punished, etc. And that's what you're basically saying with the threefold law. You're saying, I won't do anything bad because something worse will happen to me. I will basically be punished. Well, that doesn't make sense, We're not a theology of punishment. And God, Goddess, the divine, never left the world. The world is the embodiment of the divine. I was hiking through the canyons in Utah, grappling with this. That's my nature. That's what I do. And I was trying to think, so if it's not the threefold law, then what is it? Where is the moral compass for witches and for pagans, for practitioners of an earth religion? It's like, well, it has to come from our theology, from our spirituality. And it's not a belief system. It's a spiritual practice. Shamanism is a spiritual practice. Witchcraft is a spiritual practice. It is a spiritual technology that shifts our perspective, that takes off the blindfold, that enables us to see the sacred, to see the divine embodied by the world in which we live. I mean, certainly in realms of spirit, right? By altering consciousness, by journeying, the various techniques that we use in circle, by chanting and dancing and various ecstatic practices that literally alter consciousness and enable you to see what is happening in an expanded way, in alpha and theta waves, which is an expanded mode of perception that we have, but most people don't cultivate, but witches do, and shamanic practitioners and shamans and indigenous peoples do. But the great gift is when you return from those experiences and you come back with a gift. You come back with the ability to see the sacred. So if the divine is embodied in the world in which we live, what do we see? That was the work I was doing for the last number of years, and is the basis of the teaching of why the world needs her witches, and the books that I'm writing now that I hope will be out soon, in the next year or two. And the reason that the world needs her witches is that we are able to see the sacred. And we see that the world that we're living in embodies the divine. And so we see that the challenge is for us to live in a sacred way, in what is called right relationship, to live in a sacred way because we're living in a sacred world. That's when magic starts to happen, when our hearts open. And that energy that flows through us and into the world, it's not neutral, it's not electricity, which a lot of people who I think, don't really practice with much depth, they're new, right? That when you begin to open yourself to that energy and you experience it, what you're experiencing is love. The epiphany that I had after this remarkable pilgrimage that I was on in pursuit of the Green Man, who had appeared to me in Italy a number of years ago and sent me on this journey, which is the subject of the next memoir. brought me back home. And it was there that I heard Mother Earth speaking to me. And she basically said, I'm going to show you something now. I'm going to show you the principles by which all of life is organized, created, organized, and sustained. And she rattled off these things, and I wrote them down afterwards. I was in a fever, having just come back from Mexico. I wrote them down. And then I spent the next many years, first in an acute depression, not unlike that brilliant, beautiful young woman in Sweden, just overwhelmed by the contrast between what she had shown me, the perfect harmony, balance, interconnectedness, interdependency, reciprocity, the beauty of life on Earth, and the wisdom of it, the sublime wisdom with which everything was organized, and the dreadful way in which we have created and abused the world, the civilizations that we've created out of this wound that I was talking about. And after quite a long period of depression, she basically said, okay, now, if you're ready, we're going to fix this. She said, breathe. And I started to breathe. And I was, and then as I breathed, the trees began to speak to me. And I realized that the breath that I was taking into my body was the breath of life they were giving me. And when I exhaled, it was not waste, because there is no the giving back of the breath of life to them. The oxygen that trees produce is not waste. It is the breath of life, the gift of life that the green plants create for us so that we may live. And the CO2 that we exhale is not waste. It is what we create, the breath of life that we create for them so that they can live. There is an exquisite order within creation. There is, in fact, a cosmic blueprint by which all of life has been created and sustained, by which all of life is organized and continues. And for me, the moment of revelation and the reason why the world needs her witches came with a discovery. I was watching a TED Talk, 2005, by a biologist called Janet Benyus. And she was talking about biomimicry and how biologists who are interested in this field look to nature to learn how to do things better, right? Now, witches look to nature to learn how to live better. And that's what she was talking about, but in very practical terms. How to make a lens, nature's already done it. How to make an adhesive, nature's already done it. How to make a suspension bridge, nature's already done it. And she's done it all without destroying the planet, but in fact, by making the world better for all life. That was the final discovery that she came to at the end of her talk. And she called it nature's secret, nature's magic. I call it nature's secret magic. And what she said was that what biologists have discovered, which they cannot explain, they don't understand how this works, that nature has organized everything so that all of creation, the air, the water, the soil, the minerals, the plants, the animals, the amoeba in your stomach, the banana tree, the goats that live in the woods behind my house, the deer, the squirrels that run up and down the trees, my dog, everything. Just as the mother said to me years ago, everything makes life makes the world more conducive for life. That's how she expressed it. Now, all of life, when taking care of itself, eating, procreating, recreating, defecating, evacuating, even dying, everything in life makes the world a better place for life. That is the real ethic for witches, for pagans, for all peoples, because we are all children of Mother Earth. That's the ethic for all of life on the planet. Not just, we don't do bad things because threefold law, worse things will happen to us, and not the other, and you harm none, do what you will, which is sort of the other thing that people quote a lot. You harm none, do what you will. No, that's ethics for teenagers, right? It's like, don't don't drink and drive. You can drink all you want to, but don't get in a car and kill someone. No. The real ethic that comes from our spiritual teacher, from Mother Earth herself, from the divine, embodied by the planet in which we live, is that all life, in taking care of itself, not self-sacrifice, in taking good care of yourself, having a gorgeous, rich, beautiful, magical life, one in which your purpose is clear and fulfilled and the things that you love to do, you get to do, makes the world a better place for all life. That is what it means to live in a sacred manner, because you live in a sacred world. We do indeed live in a sacred world. And that is how witches can help the world, by discovering all the wisdom that Mother Earth has to teach us through her natural laws, which are in fact spiritual laws. All you have to do, yes, work with me, work with the practices, learn to take off the blindfold, learn to enter realms of spirit and come back with those eyes that are able to see. I spent a huge amount of time, a lot of my practicing life as a witch, working in realms of spirit. And it was extraordinary. It was such a revelation. But the greatest gift was when I came back and realized that I was able now to see that the divine wasn't just in realms of spirit, but was embodied by the world in which I lived, was everywhere around me, and was also within me. That is a sea change. That is the healing wisdom that the world needs now. I know. What are the odds of everybody figuring this out in time? I don't know. But I think we have to act as if, because we have a key. We have a secret part of the puzzle. The scientists are going to do what they're going to do, and the engineers will do their part, and the people who design cars will do theirs, and the people who do energy systems, solar power will do theirs, and the farmers will begin to do theirs. And if we all start to realize that we only have 10 years to change the way in which we live, we might actually be able to do this. But there's a key role. There's a key role that witches have to play, because we are the seers of the sacred. We are the ones who are able to see the divine embodied by the world in which we live. And that is the healing wisdom that will fix the wound that opened 5,000 years ago and that led to the calamity that we're dealing with now. So the spiritual wise ones, the spiritual seekers, the practitioners of spiritual technology, the ones who are learning to live in a sacred manner because they live in a sacred world, you have such an important role to play. And you don't have to go out there and proselytize, and you don't have to, you just have to begin to figure out the small steps of living your own life in a sacred way. Aware, that you're going to contradict it, that you're going to get in your car that still burns gas, or you're going to have to take a flight, that you still have a carbon footprint. But you start to find all the small ways in which you can minimize that, and not just minimize it, but give back. And the biggest thing you can give back is your heart, your love, and your spirit. When you love Mother Earth, she loves you back. She loves you back. And spending time in nature is one of the simplest and easiest ways to start to see the sacred that's embodied by the natural world in which you live. A walk, time with your familiar, your dog, your cat, your bird, whatever it is. Time with somebody that you love. And finding some small thing that you can do on a regular basis to literally give back. When you do that, the world begins to change. And if everybody starts to do that in one small way, and then 10 small ways, and then 100, it grows and it grows and it grows. And the most important thing that we begin to change is our hearts. And when our hearts are healed, there's an energy that radiates outward from us into the world, and the world starts to heal. I was truly broken when I saw how badly damaged the world was, and that we had so little time to fix things. I was terrified. I felt completely inadequate to the task of carrying this wisdom that she'd shown me. I figured no one was going to believe me, and after all, I was a witch, and who's going to listen to me? And I struggled with it for a very long time, and then she basically brought me back to life. Yeah. She breathed into me. She showed me how to breathe. She told me to breathe. I started to breathe. The plants showed me what was happening. And I started to experience the truth of the words that I had heard from her. And it became embodied. It became embodied. So I encourage you to embody the spiritual wisdom of Mother Earth. The divine is a breath away. It's a breath away. All you have to do is breathe and bring your consciousness to what is actually happening as you are inhaling this gift of life and exhaling it, giving it back. You will come into awareness as you do of how Mother Earth's natural laws are actually spiritual laws, that the physical relationships of interconnection and interdependence are actually these profound spiritual realities. There is no waste, that there is perfect balance. It is simply true that when we live in harmony with nature, conscious and aware, we are living in harmony with the divine. And it starts just with conscious, attentive breathing, and then discovering ways that you can start to give back. We've been having a lot of talks within the circle of folks that I've been working with for a while about how we can start to organize some programmatic things where we can work together, right? How do we connect with other witches? Well, one way is by all of us working together. We can do that by coming together in circle and breathing together and being conscious and using some of the practices. People are coming to the workshops that I'm giving, which is a rediscovery of a lot of the basic practices that we use to have these experiences of communion with nature. And it's important, please go to my website, phylliscurott.com, and sign up. Thanks, Chris, for reminding me to remind folks. Please go to the website and sign up so I can let you know what we come up with. And I'm going to be very interested to hear your ideas. We had thought about possibly putting together a pack, a fundraising pack that would then work on behalf of Mother Earth with Earth communities, witches, pagans, and other practitioners of Earth traditions, other indigenous peoples of the Americas, raising money together and using those in political influence, because we are such a large group now that we would have a voice and we could help to influence political institutions. It's one possibility. Another is regular ritual, where we come together in order to sustain one another and give energies back to Mother Earth. There are lots of things. I have a dear friend, Trebby Johnson, who does healing work for Mother Earth. People go to areas, local areas, where the earth has been damaged, and they do cleanups in those areas. In addition to making beauty, they make beauty in wounded areas after they've helped clean up. So there are lots of practical things that we can do together in an organized way. The pagan and Wiccan and witch communities need to start to organize around this. I don't know that we will have time to emerge as the spiritual leaders that we should be on this issue above all other faith traditions. But certainly as individuals, we can do that in our own lives and in smaller circles. And I think that we can have the kind of influence that, in fact, can help us change things in the next 10 years. So what can witches do? Everything. Everything. We can make the magic that can transform a culture of death into one of rebirth. And I think that's one of the reasons that witchcraft has become the fastest growing spirituality in the United States right now. Why so many folks are being called to it. And I think it's one reason that you're working with me, whether you have realized it or not. What else? Okay. What kind of things can be added to a wedding ceremony? We're almost at the end of the hour, but I want to add this one without it being too overt. Okay. Hand fasting. This is an old Scottish rite. And you can easily do it within any wedding ceremony. I have presided over many weddings. I am available. I will do weddings. I don't do a lot of them anymore, but I will do them. And I did this for a very darling, a dear friend who's also a priestess, became a priestess in my tradition when she was married. And she had an interfaith wedding and a really quite Jewish wedding in many ways. But we incorporated many elements. The most lovely element that you can incorporate into any other form of religious ceremony or non-religious ceremonies, the hand fasting. You have a basket of ribbons, the different ribbons, right? The different colors representing the different blessings. And at the beginning, you have somebody explain that guests are going to have an opportunity to come up. It takes time, so you have to leave time for this. They come up and they give the couple a blessing, and they tie the ribbon around your two hands. You put your hands together and the ribbon is tied around your hands. One person makes their hand like a little fist and the other puts their hand over it. That allows you to open your hand and slip out of the bundle of tied ribbons. Otherwise you could be trapped. And they come up, they pick a color, and they tie and they give you a blessing, and they tie it around your hands. It's gorgeous. People love doing it. It's a chance for them to have a moment with you, with the couple, to bless you. And it's very old. Like I said, it's a Scotch custom. They used to do it with strips of the tartan plaids from the various clans. And you can incorporate it, and no one is the wiser if you don't want to explain its point of origin. You can simply say it's an old Scottish tradition. It's called a hand fasting, which is what witches and pagans call their weddings, but you can just refer to it as an old Scottish wedding tradition. And then when you're all done, you open your hand and you slide it out, and you can keep those ribbons in a beautiful box, put them on your altar, keep them someplace safe. All right, so it's a little after 9, and that's our first hour. So I'm really grateful that you've joined me for The Witches Inn. If I didn't get to your question, I hope I'm going to be able to see this afterwards. We'll see. I will try to answer them next time. I will see you in a month. Please be sure to go to phylliscurott.com and join the e-list if you haven't already done so. You can always leave questions on Phyllis Curott, the Facebook page, or Awaken the Witch Within. We've just had a full moon. I hope yours was gorgeous. You're going to have a chance to celebrate Samhain. We didn't talk about that, but there's lots of places. Awaken the Witch Within has a beautiful Samhain ritual. Wicca Made Easy has one, Witchcrafting. We'll put one up on the website. We'll put one up on Facebook. I wish you all a very blessed Samhain. To all of your ancestors who brought you here, I express my deep gratitude. And to all of you for being with me tonight, thank you very much. It has been a joy to be the witch who's in. And I'm looking forward to doing it again with you soon. Blessings, everybody. Blessed be. Love, and our circle is open, but never, ever broken. Merry meet and merry part, and merry meet again very soon. 1 month, 1 lunar cycle. Bye.